New Canadian military policy discourages mention of God at ceremonies, calls for spiritual reflections instead. Well, that's just retarded. Let's talk about it. My name is Matthew. I served in the Canadian Armed Forces for 6.5 years, and I think this is absolutely retarded. Look, we are hell-bent, seemingly, on eroding everything that it means to be Canadian. When I joined in 2001, it was on September 11th, the day that I got my recruiting package, so a pretty significant day. And I went off to join the military. One of the first things I learned in the military, one of the first lessons I started to understand, was that this was bigger than self. Their job when you get to basic training is to rid you of your own personal ego, your own personal ethos, and replace them with the morals and value systems of the Canadian Armed Forces, so that when the time comes when they ask you to defend those virtues and values with your life, you will do so because you understand them, you live them, you breathe them, and you do so alongside your brothers and your sisters. And we have gotten to a place now where we are more interested in raising flags and talking about individuality than we are about training a competent military. And if you don't believe me, I will show you proof right here. This is the Canadian Armed Forces on Canada Day, and this is the Canadian Armed Forces marching on Canada Day. This is a first world military, by the way. Is it? Not one person in step. Not one. Just awful. That guy, awful. I don't know what that guy's doing. These guys are just a gaggle, an absolute gaggle. Listen, and I'm not trying to insult the soldiers that were doing this. This is bad leadership. This is a horrendous leadership. When you are going to be out in the public sphere, you have to be the best version of yourself and a soldier as you can be, because you're representing the Canadian Armed Forces. That's a terrible representation of the Canadian Armed Forces. It makes us look like a laughingstock. Go look at third world nations like Iran, Pakistan, India. Watch their military. And yeah, it's a little funky. But precision when it comes to doing drill. China, precision when it comes to doing drill. Canada was well regarded and well known for drill. We actually have a regiment designed solely for drill. And now we have soldiers that come out trained like that. And then we also come back to this whole thing where they don't want the chaplains talking about God in military service anymore. Listen, I'm an alcoholic. Okay. I had to go to rehab. And I did go to rehab. When I was in rehab, one of the first things that you have to adhere to is AA. You have to go to AA meetings every day, sometimes multiple times a day. The Serenity Prayer is God-based. And the AA program is based in religion and God. And everything that they talk about has to do with God. And they say to you, they're like, hey, listen, if you're not a religious person, just try to find a higher power, find something greater than self. And I'll tell you what, I'm not a very religious person because I don't know what's out there. And I'm not smart enough to tell you that there is no God. And I'm not naive enough to pretend like I have those answers. And there could be, right? I don't know. Some days I think maybe, some days I don't know. Some days I talk to God. Some days I have no idea what I'm doing. When they mentioned God during AA, I was never offended. It never stood in the way of me doing what I had to do. And so the fact that they're removing it in military settings when it comes time to prayer, but they allow religious headwear. So you can wear the turban and have other religious symbols like kirpan, and you can go to prayer rooms to pray as a Muslim. These things, like, I don't know what Canada is doing with its identity, but I don't see how this benefits Canada, how removing God from public prayer within the Canadian Armed Forces, how does that benefit Canada? It is an absolute erasure of the Canadian identity. The first thing within the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms talks about Christianity and God. You don't have to be religious to adhere to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. You don't have to be religious or celebrate religion in order to understand that document's a pretty great frickin' document, because it created the country of Canada, which, believe it or not, despite popular narrative, is a pretty great country when it's run properly. And right now it's not being run properly. We have a military that can't march in step. When you have a military that can't march in step, you have a military that can't fight. Now, that may seem hyperbolic, that may seem a little out there, but it's true. Marching is one of the basic fundamentals of personal discipline and unit discipline and adherence to order and listening and following commands. If you can't march in unison and actually adhere to the rigid structures of drill, I don't have a hope in hell that you're going to be able to handle a weapon and manage that drill and manage section attacks and attacking with mechanized brigades. I have no hope in hell that you can do that. And again, this is not a slight on the soldiers that are doing this. It's not a slight on the people that we saw on camera. This is leadership. This goes way above them. This is about political stuff, and it goes above the military as well. It is dangerous. It has real world consequence. And I've seen it time and time again. I saw it when I worked as a paramedic in the ambulance, and I saw these ideological practices come into play, like safe injection sites. And I saw the dangers of what it did to street corners and what it did to urban neighborhoods and once quiet suburban neighborhoods. I've seen the realities of those things. These things are not without consequence. They don't exist within a vacuum. And this stuff has to be called out because it does have a consequence. It has real world impact. And I'm not trying to get political here. I'm not trying to say pick the left or pick the right. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm saying is this has no benefit. Taking prayer away and taking God away has no benefit. There's nothing in this article that even says that it has benefit. It says the policy does allow the inclusion of indigenous practices in military settings for cultural and historical and educational purposes. But beyond that, don't you dare say God, because that's terrible and colonial. Listen, man, I don't know how far this stuff is going to go. I don't know how far the landslide is going to go. But if you, and I heard somebody say this the other day, and I agree with it, if you create insanity on the left, you are in turn going to create insanity on the right. Because when you swing that pendulum so far this way, it will eventually swing back the other way. And I don't want it to go to the far right. There's no reason for it to have to get there. But the left have separated themselves so far from that center margin that we are living in almost dystopian level times. And before people come at me in the comments like, oh, Canada's not dystopian. Yeah, I get that it's not dystopian right now. China didn't become China overnight. Authority doesn't become authority overnight. Erasure doesn't happen overnight. But we have tangible offerings now showing that erasure of the Canadian fabric, of the Canadian identity. And it needs to be called out, and it needs to be taken seriously. And I'm saying this as a non-religious person. I don't sit there and bitch and moan if somebody quotes the Quran to me. I don't care if somebody says Happy Kwanzaa during the holidays or Happy Hanukkah. In fact, I think it's a very pleasant thing to hear, and I say thank you so much, Merry Christmas. I say Merry Christmas because that's how I grew up. Not because I believe in the three wise men and a little guy named Jesus and a pen and North Star. Like, okay, all that stuff may or may not be true. I'm not smart enough to have the answers. But I'm also wise enough to know that the direction we're going doesn't lead to anywhere good.